doing each month. Was the first couple months, of course, were at Seaway Co-working, and we've moved everything online since then. So thank you very much. Of course, the webinar is called Green Marketing in the Age of COVID-19. And so we've got a chat up. I encourage everyone to say hi. You're welcome to, because the turnout is such that I think it's going to be okay if you unmute yourself if you have a question. We're going to keep this fairly informal, but please, let's keep this as interactive as we possibly can. And feel free to interrupt me with any question you might have or contribution. We have both Kristen and Tess from Sustainable Kingston, our co-hosts, and we'll be answering questions in the chat, which is good because they both know more than I do. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Good? Yes, excellent. All right, well, I'm going to proceed. So for those of you unfamiliar with Sustainable Kingston, we are a nonprofit based in Kingston. We were incorporated in 2012. And our goal is to enhance the livability and resiliency of Kingston. So we do this in a number of different ways. We have a service level agreement with several service level agreements with the City of Kingston to do things like our climate change symposium and the pitch-in event, which we've unfortunately had to postpone, but is coming in the fall, hopefully, and lots of other campaigns and public-facing events to promote sustainability. We also have our sustainably.eco program, in which we connect people to businesses that care, and I'm going to talk quite a bit more about that as we go along. So the question we want to ask today is, how do I position my brand and connect with green consumers in the age of COVID-19 and beyond? And so what we wanted to do is look at what are some of the evergreen, if you'll excuse the pun, green marketing practices that work, and look at, number two, we want to look at what are the obvious the obvious economic problems that we're facing and challenges during this period. What are some of the trends that the experts are pointing to? And then how do we look at green marketing through this lens and adapt to the challenges that we know are here to stay? Does that sound good to everybody? Okay, excellent. So I wanted to, here we go, green consumers. The more research I do, the more I see that the number of people who in surveys respond that they're willing to pay a premium for sustainably produced or distributed products or support companies with a strong sustainability record continues to increase. And of course, you can see products with sustainable attributes have been steadily taking more of the market share. And this is more true with millennials and Generation Y than older consumers, but overall, this is the trend. This is where we're going. When researching this, I found a particularly helpful article in the Harvard Business Review called The Elusive Green Consumer, and I've put a link to that in the chat. And it's a great article written by Catherine White, David J. Hardesty, and Rishad Habib. And they are professors at the Sauder Business School at UBC. And it's a great piece. It's for the Harvard Business Review, but they're Canadian and have a number of Canadian examples. And one thing that they talk about a fair bit that we'll chat about throughout this is the intention and action gap. So, although we have a lot of folks that respond and say, yes, I do want to spend more money to pay for sustainable products, the reality is that it's not as high as the surveys might indicate. We did our own survey here in Kingston. We had Maria Himmelbauer and Sarah Shiblik, who are two Queen's business students, did a local survey, and they found that Kingston is consistent with all the other the other surveys, and 47% are willing to spend up to 20% more on products marketed as sustainable. So that's good news locally. Recent consumer trends. There's really two takeaways. Obviously, discretionary spending is going to drop. Close to 41% of Canadians say their household spending is going to decrease. And then, of course, things are moving online. I don't know if anyone saw the Globe and Mail 46 Ways the World Will Change feature in this weekend. The front page of the report on business was the shop is going online and it's going to stay there. So that's obviously where we're going. It's where we've been going for a while, but obviously things have been really accelerated. So let me ask my first question. How many of you have increased your online shopping in the last, say month and a half? Please feel free to say so in the chat. And if you want to include some details about what you purchased, not that that's any of my business, but it's up to you. But yeah, so that's obviously that's we're going in that direction, and that is can provide a great opportunity for small businesses, but also a big challenge. And in the article they talked about, they quoted someone a restaurateur who said, I never thought I'd be spending this much time learning how to code, but here we are. So those are obviously the two big recent consumer trends. And then other predictions. Sorry, I'm just trying to change the slide. Here we go. The research I found was mostly focused on hospitality and food and beverage and agriculture, but I think it goes without saying this pertains to lots of other businesses. And so the buy local movement is here. Obviously, it's a big part of marketing for downtown BIAs and business organizations. And I think from all indications, the public is really embracing that. And the labor practices. I mean, this is really, people want to know, consumers want to know how your company, how your brand, your organization has been treating your employees, particularly if they're frontline workers. We know more about this, and there's certainly been more written about this recently than in the past. And I'm not sure if there's anything more top of mind than health and wellness, for obvious reasons. It's there with us every minute of the day. We're thinking about health and wellness. And so the good news is most organizations, in particular our 42 members at Sustainable Kingston and sustainably.eco, are really well positioned in this regard. A lot of our members are living wage employers. They purchase locally, and many have a really strong health and wellness component. And this goes without, beyond our membership, but any organizations that are brand themselves as sustainable or have sustainable products. Green marketing challenges, obviously the recession, we talked about that. The intention and action gap that I mentioned from that survey, from the Elusive Green Consumer. In one recent survey, 65% said they want to buy purpose-driven brands that advocate sustainability, yet only 26% actually do so. So this is a great opportunity. There's obviously, I'm not great at math, but 41% of folks that at least are, intending to purchase sustainably. That's the market that we want to increase. That's the gap that we want to close. And then loss of momentum. And there's been lots of discussion about the progress we were making eliminating single-use plastics and using reusables, and how that's we've had to put the brakes on that a little bit because of COVID-19. So that's a challenge, and also concern about consumer priorities. And probably everyone on this call hasn't wavered in their desire to tackle climate change and to live sustainably, but there obviously is concern that this has been pushed to the side in favor of the the health crisis that we're facing. Does anyone have any questions going right now? We're okay? All right, I'm so used to presenting in front of real people and that I can see. So it's somewhat disconcerting, but anyway, I'll assume that everything's going well. So I've come up with a few different solutions to tackle these challenges. And again, some of these things are evergreen, some of these things are just common sense. But again, we want to look through the lens of our current situation and think about how we can apply them, or if we need to apply them differently. And the first solution is transparency. And I want to talk a little bit about sustainably.eco at this point, because this is one of the benefits of being a member of sustainably.eco is you are able to communicate to consumers specifically what you have done to be sustainable. And that's through our badge system. So we have 12 badges, and each one has a specific requirement. So it's just very clear if you put up your climate action badge on your website, it's very easy to follow and see what you've done to earn that badge, or sustainable transportation. And so, we're not alone in this. There's other ways to do so, but really the most important message is to avoid greenwashing, make things very transparent. More and more, this is what consumers expect. And it allows you to tell the progress story. It allows you to say, look, we had this was our waste. We had X number of tons of waste, and we've now reduced it by 20%. And that's a really good news story. And it does involve saying, look, we were not doing well before, but overall, I think that's what consumers expect, and I think it's really important. And so my next question I wanted to pose to everyone attending is who do you think does this really well, either a global brand or a local business or someone who's really nailed the transparency piece? Is there anyone that comes to mind? Feel free to jot that down in the chat, or you can unmute yourself too and chat. Yeah, Kristen's mentioning Terra Foods in downtown Kingston. I think that's an excellent example. I think IKEA does a really good job of that. When purchasing sustainable products from them, it's very clear what they're doing specifically and why. Patagonia, Trailhead, I agree, Trailhead. I'm not familiar with Cotopaxi, but I look forward to learning more about them. Okay, so storytelling. The piece that I mentioned before that in the Harvard Business Review, they talk about appealing to either the heart or the head. As a former fundraiser, I'm drawn to, I'm inclined to talk about appealing to the heart, and the best way to do that is to personalize your story. If your insurance company has a green team, what's the story behind that? Was it a receptionist that was looking at waste and said, we got to do something, and they formed a committee? And this is what really appeals to people. I think whatever you're doing in a sustainable activity or a sustainable product, tell the story of why. Were you on a trip somewhere and saw the impact of climate change and were moved to change the way you do business, or whatever it might be. But I think it's a really important part of marketing, and it's really what people are going to what resonates with consumers. Contextualize facts. That's an important part of storytelling. I think we're at the point now that there's a greater number of people are hip to what the GHG numbers mean, but I think most folks don't. And so I know when I was working with a food waste organization, I would talk about the impact of the waste diverted in number of cars taken off the road. And it would be interesting, when people's their eyebrows would raise when I'd say, yeah, well, but in 1 month, the food diverted from Providence Care Healthcare was the equivalent of taking taking 17 cars off the road for 2 months. We really need to know. We need to have the context for the impact. And again, referring to what we were chatting before, there's a real focus on supporting your local business and sustainable companies and organizations that have sustainable products are really well positioned. And I think it's important to tell the supply chain story. This, I think, particularly if you are moving online, there's obviously there can be some negative impacts of online local business. So, or excuse me, online shopping and online business. And so, if there is a negative impact from deliveries, then explain where it's coming from. And there's a lot of members that are very good at talking about supply chain. And I had a great conversation with the proprietor of Kingston Coffee House, which is a sustainably.eco member. And they tell that supply chain story really well and are really invested in that. And then talk about local impact stories, particularly from this time. If DAF Brewing comes to mind as a company that has gotten a lot of great PR out of the work they've done in producing hand sanitizer. And there's probably lots of other businesses locally in Kingston that I'm not aware of that have delivered food to healthcare workers or have gone above and beyond for their employees or something along those lines. And I think it's important to not be too Canadian and shed it from the rooftops and really tell that story. Is there anyone that else, any other business that comes to mind that's doing a great job in making those links to their local, their support for local either produce or local, emphasizing their local impact? Share Mayor, yeah. Yeah, I ordered something for Mother's Day, and that was, I think, a hashtag across the Share Mayor's website is support local. I mean, they've been really driving that home, and they have been in Black Dog. Yeah, that's great. Number 4 is social influence, and again, this is something that the researchers at the Sauder School talk about. It's one of the most effective ways to elicit pro-environmental behaviors in consumption. Again, if I put my fundraising hat on, you want to tell the good news story that makes in this case, the consumer, in the case of fundraising, the donor, the hero of the story and part of a larger community. And it's an interesting time with regards to social influence because of COVID-19. This is really, I mean, the number one thing you keep hearing over and over is we're all in this together. There never before has there been, in my lifetime anyway, has there been so much pressure, social pressure to conform with the social contract, to stay home. There aren't police marching in the street sending you, telling people to go home or to, it's not martial law. People are really, rightly or wrongly, behaving based on social influence. And this has always been an important part of green marketing. I think, again, communicating this as a good news story and putting in a positive light is the best way to do it. And I think thanking green consumers is a really slick and effective way to do that, because the implied message is you're part of this group that has reduced waste by 25%. You're part of the winning team, and that just encourages. It's a real snowball effect. So I think social influence is even more important these days. We've already talked about health and wellness. This, again, is super top of mind and will continue to be for years. And so one thing that a challenge for all of us is how do we communicate the strong link between sustainability, climate change, and global health? And, I was listening to Bob McDonald on the National a couple days ago talking about, it was asked, would does climate inaction, could climate inaction lead to another pandemic? And yeah, it's very clear the science is there that the impacts of climate, one of the impacts of climate change is a possible pandemic or future pandemics. So, how do you communicate that to make that part of your brand without exploiting the situation or look like you're exploiting the situation? And I think that's a skillful dance, but I think it's an important one to make because, this is really what's going to continue to drive home the message that we need to act. Okay. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Feel free to interrupt me, please, or if I've forgotten anything. So in reaching green consumers, we've talked about sustainably.eco. I'll talk a bit about that in a little more detail as we wrap up. Content marketing, as a former magazine publisher and freelance writer, I think that's a really effective way to tell your story. Content marketing, I was struggling for a definition off the top of my head, so I looked one up. So content marketing is a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience, and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. There's your content marketing definition. Kingston Integrated Healthcare, I think, is a great example of someone that's really telling, again, the health and wellness story and the sustainability story through blogging and through some really great content. There's lots of other examples, and again, I'd encourage you to, if there's any other business that comes to your mind who's really doing a great job in that, please feel free to write them down in the chat. There's some really great stories, and the public is starved for good news stories. We see that with things like, distilleries repurposing their space for hand sanitizer, and businesses that are delivering food to healthcare workers, so those are savvy marketers, and they're obviously well intended and doing it for all the right reasons, but they've cut through the noise, and so I think that's important to do. Target marketing, again, how do we close that gap, that intention and action gap? I think going forward, it's going to be, again, linked to content marketing. Reaching those audiences, figuring out who they are specifically, is going to be incredibly important. I don't have this online, or on the slide, but how do you transition your business online? And I had an interesting experience. I was looking for books for my son, and my first thought was like, well, I'll be able to find this really easy on the Indigo website, and I was thinking, well, no, I want to support a novel idea. They're right downtown. I really would prefer to support them. I couldn't, they don't have the capacity to have a online shopping system like Indigo, but they do have a space where you just write them a note and say, what are the names of the books you're looking for? And you got a call the next day saying, hey Jeff, thanks for emailing. I've got these books. I'm going to have to order in this one. And so there's this incredibly personal experience, which to me was superior to the sort of impersonal online shopping. So I think small and medium-sized businesses have a real, can really blend what they do well, which is that personal touch with an online component. And it's just a matter of being really thoughtful about how to do that. So we got a bit of time, and so I thought I'd expand a little bit about sustainably.eco and talk a bit about how it works. I mentioned the badge system, so we have over 12 badges, and our members, when they become members, we do an analysis of their business. We look at either their physical space or their operations or both, establish a baseline, and produce a very detailed report that talks about what they're doing well and maybe where there's some areas of improvement. And then we set goals, and we come up with ways that they can meet their targets. And then through all this, we support the business and connect that business to this growing number of ecologically minded consumers through our sustainably.eco webpage, which I recommend everyone check out if you haven't had a chance. We're really excited about all the other things we're doing. We're starting a podcast soon, and which will feature members, things that are going on locally, and then also some guests that have more of a global or national scope. But I encourage you to check out sustainably.eco as a way to help connect yourself, connect your business, connect what you do to those businesses, and then also check out the members. If you know, like me, wanted to support a business that is doing great work locally, you can find them on sustainably.eco. We provide further support such as green team support and recognition and marketing through things like our evening of recognition, and obviously mentioned before, technical support. So I've wrapped up a little earlier than anticipated, but I'm here to answer as many questions as you have. And feel free to unmute yourself. We're happy to have a conversation about this. If there's some examples that you'd like to share that I missed, or some questions you have for me, or either Tess or Kristen or Simone, please let me know. Does anyone have any questions? I'm just looking at the chat. It's a nice day out today. So I thank you all for coming, because I know it's optimal deck weather, walking weather. I don't see any questions at this point, nor do I hear them, and that's fine. Oh, we've got one. Here we go. Question is, how do we bridge the gap between people who want to actually buy sustainably?
Sorry, I didn't finish off writing the whole thing.
Go ahead.
My name is Devin. I'm a co-founder of a company called Algae, and I spoke at the Climate Symposium. And one thing that we've found, just kind of in the brief period that we've been in existence, kind of the 8 to 10 months, is that there are lots of people out there that really want to buy sustainably, but their purchasing decisions don't actually state that they do. Like there's no evidence that people actually want to purchase sustainably. They say, everyone's like, yeah, you know, I love sustainable brands, I love to purchase sustainably. But when they actually get to the grocery store shelf, they'll choose something based off of price.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very subjective question, and I don't necessarily know if there's an answer, but do you have any advice on how to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of depends on what that product is. I think probably of all the suggestions, the solutions that we talked about in the webinar, I think maybe social influence is the one that's got the most traction. And so I think positioning the brand as a successful brand that sustainably minded consumers are using is probably, there's the most evidence that's the most, sorry, I'm rambling here. That's probably one of the most effective ways to drive that home. It's hard. It's going to be really challenging with you know, when you've got such a significant decrease in discretionary spending to compete on price. But I think if you can really leverage that, that's sort of where the most evidence points to.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, I think it's kind of the the type of question that's reliant on consumer culture ultimately shifting.
Yeah.
And maybe we're in a good time for that to ultimately happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's also, comes down to target marketing. If your product's in Terra Fine, if it's in Terra Foods, then you're in a spot where people are already making that choice to, they're shopping there instead of somewhere else because they want to support local, they want to eat organically, they want to make sustainable food choices, and so and whether that's finding that online space, aligning yourself with other sustainably minded companies, and being in that same space online. Obviously I'm kind of driving to like sustainably.eco, but it could be something else. It could be B Corps. It could be, being part of Switch, depending on what kind of business you're in. But yeah, I think finding, we need to all find the space that we need to go where those consumers are already, as best we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
I have a quick question, kind of based off further the previous question. Is I do eco dog products, and what I've noticed when you talk about some social influencers, I find it interesting of finding the appropriate retail space. Because just to go into a pet store, okay, but when you've got a wall full of product, it's how do you separate yourself? Because we all know in the pet stores, sort of, it's a local one, it's purchase space. But how do you? Because it's not about for me going into Terra Foods, because it doesn't make any sense that an eco dog product would be in Terra Foods, and a lot of the eco stores or the people that think ecologically, there's not a pet shop type of store, or a store that could be kind of, I don't, maybe there is and I'm just missing it. But it's just trying to find, knowing and finding. Yeah, if that made any sense. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's I always, again, I'm a fundraiser by training, and so I always go down to building relationships, and
Yeah.
you're right. It can be, if there isn't if there isn't already a space for you, you need to create one, and then build those relationships. And whether that's online or through things like the Memorial Center Farmers Market, or whatever it might be. And can be a tough slog, but at the end of the day, that's where I mentioned that novel idea, and they're not even a sustainably.eco member, but I just had a really good customer experience with them, and I'm going to go back. That's where I'm getting all my books from now on. And it's all about changing habits, and so I didn't have that as a slide, but I mean, I think that's just sort of a evergreen thing that we need to continue to do, is to build those relationships, and you'll create that network. But this is Paula, right? Paula?
Yeah.
So Paula, we chatted, and I mean, you've got a great new online platform that looks great. And I think, again, with the increased move to online sales and online shopping, I think you're really well positioned to take advantage of that. So it might not be in a physical space, but it can definitely exist online for sure.
Yes, yeah. It's just sort of one of those things, always just trying to be alert, and when things kind of go to the new normal, of where do you go from there? So yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and check Kristen just wrote a great comment about eco-friendly pet products.
Oh.
Which I recommend checking that out. And Kristen is a wonderful pet owner and knows a lot about that. So she's a great person to talk to. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Okay, well, it's a little earlier, but if no one has any other questions or comments or things they'd like to share, I think we'll wrap this up. I'm recording this and we'll put it on the website if you know someone that wanted to check it out but wasn't able to. And thank you very much for coming and taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.